All right. We are cooking. Good evening. We're going to talk about villains. I like villains because villains are complex, misunderstood, nuanced, all the stuff that is juicy and interesting. When you think of a villain, what do you think of? Do you think of the Joker, a cartoon or a character, or your boss, or your boyfriend, or your wife, or your children, or the girl who stole your lunch money as a kid? In our own lives, we usually have a villain somewhere. And sometimes we can even identify when we are the villain in a story, the person responsible for a problem. So I started thinking about villains and why we tend to focus so much on who's responsible for it when it so seldom leads to stopping the problem itself, especially in that sequence. If you work in a toxic work situation, it's because it is, here's a new word I'm going to create. It might already be a word, culturize. We culturize things. You can have toxic work environments. There is a problem that has normalized. It is just almost invisible. The problem has become the problem has become the culture. Responsibility asks, who caused this problem? Change asks, how is this problem continuing? Because I feel like we prioritize pointing at who's responsible as if that has any effect on changing the problem. But so often it doesn't. It's a variable that we don't have control over. We don't have control over someone else owning up to a problem. We don't have control over someone else not only owning up to it, but stopping the problem if they are responsible for it, right? So what I like to do is, if it's a dynamic that I'm inside of, I look at my role and I say, okay, the only thing in this that I have full control over is what my role is involved in. Hear me out. There are always going to be things that dynamic depends on to continue. And we spend most of our energy on the who's responsible for the problem and who's to blame. And then we don't know what to do after that. If they don't own up to it and they have no interest in changing the problem, we get stuck there, especially when it's a dynamic that we can't get out of. But that bothers me because I don't like to depend on other people. I also don't like to be stuck in shitty dynamics. I am very good at aborting mission whenever possible. But in the situations where you can't abort mission, you are forced to look at a dynamic and either say, well, it's just how it is, which I am also terrible at. But what I figured out is I'm a really good problem solver, and not in the kumbaya, let's love each other and be besties type of problem solving, but really looking at a problem and saying, if this is affecting me continuously, then I'm inside of this dynamic. Is there anything I'm doing that's assisting in continuing this problem? But if I am only focused on blame, I am not focused on whatever role it is that I'm playing in this dynamic. Separate it from responsibility, okay? I could be the hostage. I don't like looking at who's to blame because it shifts me away from all of my leverage. Because if there's any leverage to be had, if there's any change that I have control over, it's going to be related to whatever role I have in the dynamic. Because I don't want to wait for the responsible party to change. A lot of times they don't change. We somehow think if we blame people, it's like we have this trust and faith that they will have a come to Jesus moment. Can I use that phrase on this? I'm not going to cut that out. Where they own up to it. But we always treat it as if that's going to fix the problem. But if we can't trust the responsible party to fix the problem, we have to somehow find if there's anything else, which is what I call leverage, that we can do to change it without getting destroyed. Because a lot of times we know what we can do to try and change a problem, but we also see a risk. If I speak up, I'm going to be on the hit list, isolated, retaliated against, micromanaged, targeted. These are all very real things in workplaces, and they're often real in relationship dynamics too. I think this is why we get stuck. I know what I could do to change it, but I also know that it will get me into hot water. And so we just kind of get stuck. I've talked way too long. But I think a big step in making changes to ongoing problems in our lives is to reprioritize the villain in the story. The villain can be 100% responsible for a problem, and I still feel like prioritizing the villain is burning fuel. It's wasting energy. We are putting the solution in the villain's hand. We are saying, this will not change unless you own up to the problem and you fix the problem. And that often never happens. That is why I'm less interested in the villain. I want to know how to change a problem. If there's a fire in my house, if someone started a fire, what am I going to do first? Go out and find who started the fire? Or am I going to put the fire out and then deal with finding the perpetrator? I'm going to want to put that fire out first, and then we'll deal with who's to blame for it. But I really think that reprioritizing these things can change problems in our lives that seem to just continue, and we don't quite know how to put an end to it or even how to shift it even a little bit. But I think the first shift is going from who is to blame to how is this problem continuing, and identifying your role is the only way you can find whatever leverage you have to make changes. I have a lot more to say, but I don't want to talk for 5 hours. I'm going to ease it in. There's a lot behind this, and I want someone to talk to about it. I don't have a lot of friends other than cats and birds, but there's a lot of stuff. There's a lot of stuff that I think if we shift a little bit and do just start reprioritizing things, I think it can start kind of loosening the dynamics that we find ourselves in our lives that are like, how is this still happening? And we don't know how to stop it because it's become so normal. It happens to all of us. I don't know. I get really interested in stuff like that because I think it makes it even trickier because we're so quick to assign blame, who's the bad guy. And often I don't feel like focusing on that is always gonna lead to the change we're expecting. All right, that's it. Thanks for hanging out with me. It's 1 a.m. So me and the cat are gonna go to sleep, or we're gonna try. I'll see you guys later.